The Mekong, the world's 8th longest river and one of its richest. It affects the livelihood of 60 million people living on its path through 6 different countries, starting in China, where it's called the Lancang River. Fed by glacial melt on the Qinghai-Tibet Plateau, it then runs through China's Yunnan province, enters Southeast Asia, flowing past Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, and Cambodia, before emptying into the South China Sea from Vietnam. In downstream countries, it's called the Mekong. For countries along its path, the river is a source of cooperation, an ancient trade route connecting the 6 countries to each other and to the rest of the world. But the river has also been a source of contention, especially in recent decades since China began building hydropower stations on its upper reaches. Opponents have questioned their effect on the ecology of the region, as well as their social impact on communities downstream. The controversy again boiled up recently after a study funded by the US State Department claimed that the Chinese dams have held back large amounts of water in their reservoirs, exacerbating a severe drought in Southeast Asia last year. The study, titled Monitoring the Quantity of Water Flowing Through the Upper Mekong Basin Under Natural Unimpeded Conditions, was done by the US consulting company Eyes on Earth.
It is neither peer-reviewed nor published in any serious academic journal. It is confusing that such a report gained widespread popularity among many Western media and politicians.
Our cameras have been granted exclusive access to some of the hydropower projects on the Lancang to find out more about the issue. Eleven hydropower dams now straddle the Lancang River in China's southwest Yunnan province. Together, they generated 96.87 billion kilowatt-hours of electricity in 2019, which mainly supplied the local Yunnan province and Guangdong province in the southern coastal region. Jinghong Hydropower Station is the last of the 11. Jiang Jinlei oversees operation safety of the Jinghong Hydropower Station.
咱们用水，但是用的不是水量，而是用的水的能量。
To put it simply, hydropower plants capture the energy of falling water to generate power.
从机组里边走呢，就变成了电，可以说是没有消耗一滴水，但是呢，它的能量转化成了电呢，传走了，用来对这个经济社会发展。
The hydrological geography of the Mekong is to some extent affected by upstream conditions. But most of the water comes from tributaries within the lower Mekong basin. According to various studies, the Lancang River in China contributes only about 13.5% of the total flow during an average year.
水电站把汛期多余的水，就是可能会对下游产生洪涝灾害的水，把它蓄起来，然后放在 枯水期，下游很需要水的时候再放下去。
China is not the only country which has built dams on the Lancang Mekong River. Along the lower Mekong and its major tributaries, there are now nearly 280 dams in operation, with more than 90 new ones planned. Li Honggang is in charge of coordinating the activities of the Cascade Dams at the headquarters of Huaneng Lancang River Hydropower in the provincial capital Kunming. The company built and now operates all 11 dams on the Lancang.
澜沧江的这一个特点是什么呢？就是说它这个天然来水，6到10月份大概占前年水量的70%多，5个月的时间占了70%多，另外7个月的时间只占前年水量的不到30%。所以呢，在天然状况下，在枯期可能面临着没有水用，到了这个汛期6到10月份。 集中来水，防洪的压力又非常大。
Li Honggang says dams aren't causing the drought conditions. Quite the contrary, he says. they're part of the solution. In general terms, dams regulate the flow of water so that periods of high and low flows can be more evenly distributed. In more technical terms, here's a breakdown of the arguments made in the Eyes on Earth report. The study first translates satellite measurements into a land surface wetness index in China's Yunnan province, through which the Lancang flows. Using the wetness index to predict natural flow, the study suggests the region in 2019 actually had slightly above average combined rainfall and snowmelt during the May to October wet season.
主要的模型在它这个报告里面，一个呢就是湿度指数的模型，是这个作者本人他开发的，名字就是用他的名字来命名，叫 BWI 叫 Basis Wetness Index。但是这个作者他在以前发表的期刊论文里面，他明确的这个多次的提出，这样一个指数不太适合于这种植被覆盖非常茂密的山区。但实际上这个可能作者不太了解，他的研究区域也就是主要是咱们澜沧江流域这个区域，那就是植被非常茂密的山区，所以这个指数这个方法的适用性是值得存疑的。
The Eyes on Earth study then compares the natural flow of the Mekong with readings of the river height gauge from Changsan, Thailand, the monitoring station closest to China. The difference identifies how the dams are altering the amount of water flowing from China into the lower Mekong. The study finally concludes that currently 126.44 meters of river height was missing at the gauge in Changsang over a 28-year study period.
意思就是说，上游的水库用水等等，把这个水用掉了这么多米的水深的这么一个数据。那这个报告呢，它本身并没有说这个126.44米相当于多少。
Professor Tianfu Qiang from China's Tsinghua University has long been devoted to the study of the hydrological conditions of the Lancang Mekong River.
根据我们对这个地方水文情况的掌握，我们初步估计了一下这个大概是呢2800亿方水。那么这个数字是非常令人吃惊的，因为根据我们的这种统计分析咱们上游澜沧江这些年建的所有的水库的库容加起来是大约是450亿方这么一个库容，而我们这个上游也没有大的这种引水从澜沧江里面把水引走这样的一个活动，所以说这两个数字差别是非常大的，这说明它的这个结论是不准确的。
Recently, Professor Tianfu Qiang has led a study in which he found that the 2019 drought was due largely to environmental factors, including high temperatures and decreasing rainfall. Indeed, it was one of the worst droughts in Southeast Asia in the past century. Mekong water levels were brought to their lowest points in living memory. In some regions, age-old ways of life were under threat.
ฝนตกก็มีส่วนฝนมันมืดไหนก็ตกตรงนั้นมันตกไม่ทั่วที่น้ำขึ้นนี่ไม่ใช่เพราะน้ำฝนนะคงจะเป็นเพราะน้ำทางจีนเขื่อนจีนเขาปล่อยมาปกติเดือนนี้แล้วน้ำจะหลากแล้วน้ำจะถึงข้างบนนู่นแล้วแต่ตอนนี้ยังไม่ขึ้นเลย
Farmers found it difficult to pump water for their crops.
ผลผลิตได้บัดเต็มร้อยครับเพราะว่ามันเหี่ยวเฉาลงตายไปก็มีรดน้ำแบบแป้ครับเนี่ยผมก็ปลูกเป็นรุ่นไหนก็น้อยเดียว3 วันต้องได้หัวเตือครับ
The Eyes on Earth study claims that upstream in China, regions along the Lancang River enjoyed substantial rainfall and snowmelt in 2019. We set out to find out if that was true. 300 kilometers up the river from the Thai border is the village of Nannuoshan in China's Yunnan province. Locals rely heavily on cultivating the pu'er tea, a Yunnan specialty. But rising temperatures and the lowest rainfall in decades have severely reduced the harvest.
18年年底到12月开始吧，到19年年底到2020年的4月就已经没过雨，就是很干。现在我们这个地方，如果要么的话就很潮湿的，有一个水分的。但这2年的话， 都是灰尘，摸不到一点水分。
According to data collected from hundreds of rain stations along the Lancang River, the total amount of rainfall in the region reached 680.4 millimeters in 2019, about 25% less than its long-term average. So both statistical data and on-the-ground observations suggest the drought in 2019 affected the whole Lancang Mekong River basin. China suffered from it too, just as Southeast Asian countries had.
像云南这边，如果降水，比较少，出现干旱的话，它会影响这种径流的一个方面，影响是比较大的。那径流少的话，它会影响，相对来说，它会影响这个河流的这种水流量。
About 100 kilometers downstream from the Jinghong hydropower station is China's border with Myanmar. From there, the river flows about 10 kilometers along the borderline to the point where China, Myanmar, and Laos meet. There's no major water storage project in this region, which means whatever amount of water that came into the Jinghong reservoir and the amount that was released in 2019 could offer proof on whether or not the Chinese dams have choked off the Mekong. According to data provided by Huaneng Lancang River Hydropower, the Jinghong station received a calculated 40.02 billion cubic meters of natural unimpeded water flow in 2019, while releasing 51.89 billion cubic meters, a 29% extra. Experts say that points to the dam's drought relief functions.
去年我们也是遭遇了一个大旱之年，但是在这种情况下，实际上都比这个天然的来水要大，就是放下去的水。
Scientists say the hydrological conditions upstream compounded the drought downstream.
它有的时候是全流域性质的，上游和下游同时干旱。你像这个19年的干旱。 就是澜沧江也发生了很严重的旱情，上游发生干旱的时候呢，这个相应的就是送往下游的水就会少一些就会少一些，就会一定程度上会影响下游。
The drought has defied the usual hydrological patterns of the Lancang Mekong River. An alarm was raised for those who have a stake. Countries along the river are now conducting joint studies on the cause of the record low flows in 2019. In a commentary titled Understanding the Mekong River's Hydrological Conditions, published in response to the report done by Eyes on Earth, the Intergovernmental Mekong River Commission, or MRC, said the findings of the report did not reflect the actual hydrological conditions. Founded in 1995, the commission includes Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. An agreement was reached between the 4 member countries on the sustainable development of the Mekong River Basin. The MRC explained in the commentary that their preliminary analysis suggests the 2019 drought was due largely to a shortened rainy season and an El Niño event that triggered higher temperatures and higher rates of evaporation.
What we found is that the monsoon rain began, almost 2 weeks late and stopped a bit earlier, about 3 weeks earlier than usual. What we receive is that only about 75% of rainfall that we receive in 2019 as compared to the previous or normal year.
This is what's fueled China's obsession for hydropower. For decades, China's coal-powered economy has been one of the world's biggest polluters. Now the country wants to kick its coal habit.
中国为什么要开发水电？就中国的电源结构长期处在很不合理的状态。我们煤电长期在80%左右。
Ma Hongqi is one of China's earliest dam engineers, now an academician at the Chinese Academy of Engineering.
这20年我们拼命地往开发清洁能源，是为了改善我们的电源结构。西方发达国家的这个水电开发的程度，都在60%到80%。这个美国开发程度大概80%。 我们国家的水能资源是世界第一呀，但是我们的开发程度、开发率还仅仅50%。
The recent extreme climate and hydrological conditions have sparked an urgent plea for countries along the Lantang-Mekong River to work together to improve data sharing, promote coordination, and ensure more effective responses to drought and water flow issues.
While China is not a party to the 1995 Mekong Agreement, it can play, and to some extent has already played, a role in supporting the downstream nations. And I believe some key specific area that need to build on would be, first, open and transparent data and information sharing. Second, joint operations of all the mainstream cascade dam is very important. And the joint management of sediment and also ensure safety of navigation, and ultimately to develop joint mechanisms for planning and management of the basin.
In the past 18 years, 2 Chinese hydrometeorological stations close to border with Myanmar have shared hourly data in the wet season of each year, published on the MRC's website. The countries downstream want to expand that to all year round.
可能对于这个下游国家，水资源的这种开发利用，然后这些工程的调度啊等等吧，各项工作可能还是不够的哈，还是不够的。我自己也觉得，就是说，这个还可以进一步的来这种增加共享的程度。当然，从我们研究者来说哈，这个我们也非常高兴，这个数据共享了之后，我们也能够更方便的来做研究。
In recent years, there have been numerous cases of hydropower dams on the Lantang successfully alleviating droughts and floods downstream.
这个14年7月份的时候，受那个台风威马信的影响，在我们这个澜沧江中下游，然后呢就产生了非常大的洪水。那么我们呢通过这个水库削峰，就是把这个洪水拦在水库里面，削峰的比例达到87%，这样呢就极大的减缓了下游国家，就是下游沿线国家的这个防洪的压力。
16年，湄公河下游遭遇大旱，我们利用小湾水库是一个多年调节水库，往下游放了126.5亿立方米的水，去缓解了老挝和越南的严重的旱情。它那是100年一遇的干旱。湄委会啊发来感谢信，认为中国充分照顾到了这个下游国家的旱情，是负责任的表现。
But even hydropower's most adamant advocates admit its flaws.
建水坝的确是对生态是有影响的，我不能说一点影响都没有。对于生态的影响里面呢，其中对鱼类的影响是最大的。
Dams both upstream in China and in lower Mekong countries change the natural rhythm of the river, blocking fish migration routes and reduce the amount of sediment needed for farming downstream.
我们澜沧江公司在开发的时候，怎样保护鱼类，我们采取了很多措施。
In one such program, fish are artificially hatched in carefully controlled environments and released into the river.
对珍稀植物、动物、珍贵的鱼类进行一个保护，使它们这个受到电站，因为电站影响了它们的一些生活环境，把这个影响降到最低。
In terms of navigation, greater water security in the dry season means increased navigation and cross-border trade, which the MRC has named as a development opportunity.
我们南长江湄公河这条黄金水道原来是只有半年航运的，一到枯季啊，船通不了的。但是由于我们修了这些水库调剂以后，我们这个必须要从景洪店上往下放舵手，就是全年通航，提高了这个南长江湄公河的航运能力。
There's no simple trade-off between the benefit of hydropower and its social and environmental costs. Climate change, overpopulation, industrialization, and other development activities are compounding the challenge.
What is important for us, for the rapid country, we need to develop in such a way that strike the balance in terms of meeting the needs and also at the same time keeping the balance between the country, balance between the economic growth and environmental protection and ecology. So the challenge that we are facing now is about how to strike the balance here.
The Mekong has been a giver of life for centuries, and there's no doubt that the mighty river has entered uncharted waters thanks to a combination of climate change and human factors. But as the MRC has pointed out, the changing conditions of the Mekong is a challenge and an opportunity. What's in store for the river is up to the 6 countries along its path and their people, whose interests and destinies are connected by the same river, mountains, and paddy fields.